So we've featured the KTM 1290 Super Adventure quite a few times on the KNOX channel now. But like all bikes, when you spend a little bit more time with it and you back-to-back them with some of their main rivals, it gives you a different context from which to think about it. And in this video, I'm going to be sharing what I think are the best bits about this bike, where I think perhaps it would struggle, and what I would improve if it was my own machine. But before we get into that, it's just a quick one to say that this 1290 Super Adventure is absolutely fabulous. We've ridden it on every terrain that you could conceive possible, from riding on a beach to riding on tough trails and in some of the most amazing A-roads that we've got here in the beautiful Lake District. It's absolutely held its own against its main rival, and it is very, very impressive. So the first distinctive, which really stands out to me, is the engine of the 1290 Super Adventure. In this, guys, it literally just does everything really, really well. It's massively fast. Even though it had a 10 horsepower deficit to the Multistrada, it was every bit as fast everywhere and in every rev range. It'll do third gear power wheelies. It will climb up tight and nadgery rough trail without stalling at sort of walking speed. It's just a phenomenal engine, and it'll modulate a power slide if you want it to on loose sand. It's really, really fantastic. But even more impressive than the pure performance is how it does that in its economy. This is an economical motor, and we were using about 60% less fuel on this in comparison to the Multistrada. So it was every bit as fast, it used 60% less fuel. That, in my book at least, is very impressive. Next thing that I think is really impressive is the way that the electronics and the dash are to navigate. I've used quite a few KTMs now over the last couple of years. Maybe I've got a little bit used to them. I find the whole navigation of the menu system very intuitive, the way that you get into your different modes, very easy to do, very straightforward. All of the icons are very easy to read and navigate through. You've got these C1 and C2 button up the top that just allows you to sort of hotline and get into your menu system where you want to be very quickly, so to turn off the traction control or put off-road ABS on or something like that. I find that a fantastic dash interface, really, really top notch. The other thing that I've really enjoyed using this time that we've had the 1290 is the adaptive cruise control. For me, it's the future. I absolutely love it, particularly on longer journeys. It allows you to manage your speed much better than just if you're using the throttle. And also, if you set in the correct distance, you know, either medium or far, you just keep a really nice safe distance from that car in front. It's just a safer way to travel, in my opinion. I think it's really innovative, and I've really enjoyed using it. Now, I've said this before in previous reviews that we've done, but I think the weight management of the 1290 Super Adventure is fantastic. With the seat in the lower setting, I can put my feet either side, no problems. I can pick the bike up off the side stand, absolutely no issues. And that has sort of combined to make me quite confident in it and not get too intimidated in an off-road environment as well. I think the weight management of this bike is very, very good. Now, we did put it on the scales, and with a full tank of fuel, it was weighing 235 kilos with 23 litres of fuel in it. Now, that's some 7 kilos lighter than the Multistrada. I think that's very impressive. Now, I said I was going to give some insights in this video, and here's one that I think adds to the lightweight feel of this bike. I think with a couple of little modifications, you could make this sub 230 kilos, fully fueled with 23 litres of fuel motorcycle. First thing is, this end can is quite a lump. It looks big on camera, as you can see, but it's also quite heavy as well, and there's a lot going on inside of it. Now, I weighed this thing at 6.9 kilos, so it's actually quite heavy. Now, having a quick Google round, I found an Arrow road legal exhaust that can just replace this, and this will save 3.5 kilos from the bike just with a slip-on exhaust. It's not likely to be super loud because you've got two big catalytic converters before the end can, but it will save you a lot of weight. So I think that's definitely something that I would consider doing. It's a big 3.5 kilo weight loss. You could also replace the battery for a lithium one. That will save you another 2.5 kilos as well. So round about then, we're looking at about 6 kilo weight loss for not a lot of effort. Okay, it's going to cost you a little bit, but it's not a lot of effort. That would make the gap, the weight gap between this and the Multistrada about 14 kilos, which is quite considerable. And if you were to do those mods and compare it to a GS1250, for example, the stock one, you would be saving 20 kilos against that bike. And against the GS1250 Adventure, you'd be saving 40 kilos. Now that's a massive difference and makes this quite an attractive option. So on to a couple of areas where I think the KTM perhaps isn't quite as good as its peers. Now the first thing is the electronics. While I think the electronics on the Super Adventure are good actually, they're possibly not quite as seamless as other bikes on the marketplace. When we took it on the mountain passes that we've got, they're so bumpy and they incorporate a lot of inclines with bumps as well. That's enough to make mincemeat out of anybody's traction control systems on any bike, because the rear wheel's skipping, the front wheel's skipping, sometimes in the air. And unfortunately with this bike, it just created a bit of a kangaroo sort of effect where you were feeling the power come in and then come out. It just wasn't very smooth. Now you take a Yamaha system, for example, that would make a much better job of that because it's just a smoother electronics. With that in mind, we actually found it was a little bit more seamless just to turn the electronics off because you got a bit more of a smoother ride. But I'd also like to see in future iterations of the Super Adventure the ability to turn the wheelie control off and keep the traction control on, for example. A little bit more options available in that. I'd also like to see not just wheelie control turned off or on, but the different degrees that it would allow you to pull a wheelie, for example, or at least have the wheel come up in the air and keep it smooth without just chopping you off like kangaroo style. So I think there's some areas of improvement that I'd be hoping for in future models. But while we're talking about the electronics, I might as well mention something that I did really enjoy, and that is the hill hold control, which has apparently been on this bike before, but I've never used it before. On our mountain passes where we've got really steep and we're turning round to get back for the camera, or on the rough trails that we've got, the hill hold was absolutely awesome. Stopped us rolling back down the hill, just held us there, and then you can just modulate the clutch and drive back up. Really top-notch feature. Now I did mention this before, but I am really not a fan of the Mitas tyres that come on this bike. I've got no idea why KTM have put these Mitas tyres on their flagship model when some of their other models in their range, like the 890 Duke R for example, comes on top-notch rubber. These, I wanted to give them a shot. They've come on the bike every time we've had them, but after a lot of experience, I'm just really not a fan. They're good in the dry, they're absolutely fine in the dry, the stability's fine, but as soon as you take them outside of that operating window and you put them in the wet or in an off-road scenario, you just lose all confidence. I lose all feel when the wet weather comes. And unfortunately, that did give the Ducati a bit more confidence in the handling, particularly in the wet. They just feel really vague to me in the wet, and I'm just not very confident with them. And the rear end was genuinely stepping out all of the time. In an off-road environment, they're just not fit for purpose. You've got pretty much no tread, no traction at all. I mean, it's like a slick on part of the contact patch on the rear. And I think there would be quite a lot of improvement if we were to upgrade them. If it was my own bike, I'd put in like a Karoo 3 or even the Pirelli Scorpion Trails, or the ones that are on the Norden 901, which are really good in the dry, wet and off-road as well. One thing I will say about the 1290 is that it definitely doesn't crash as well as some of its younger siblings. Now, if I was to look at the 790 Adventure or its predecessor, the 890 Adventure, those bikes crash really well. They've got a big fuel cell here, and they're really robust to crashing. I mean, at that Sweet Lamb Adventure School, people are dropping them all day long and they just brush it off, no issues. Well, this 1290 isn't the same actually, and while they look like the fuel cells here, that they'd be the same, they're actually not. This is just a plastic guard, but unfortunately the plastic guard is actually connected to this big fairing here. What I would do if this was my own bike is put the full crash protection on it, and it's a nice cage, it goes around the bike, and that would stop that happening. I would actually consider changing the handlebars, believe it or not. Ridden in isolation, this KTM is fine, it's absolutely fantastic, but the Multi came with a handlebar. It was actually 10 centimeters wider. It changes it, makes you less sort of hunched up like this, and a bit more wider, a bit more relaxed, more leverage, more feel, a little bit better for the off-road. I would definitely consider it. It looks like there's enough room on the cables to push it out, you know, maybe another 3 centimeters each side. That would be something that I would definitely consider. And this last one is probably a bit of a red herring and sort of against what I've been talking about before in terms of making the bike more extreme, but I'd actually consider buying the Ergo seat, which has a heated element within it as well. I think that would actually put the icing on the cake for this as a long touring machine. You've got heated grips, have a heated seat. It made a big difference on the Ducati, and I think that would just make it the all-round super adventure bike that it is. This bike, as tested here, locked and loaded, it's got the tech pack and heated grips and so on. It's retailing at 16.5 grand as we're testing it right now. But if you to compare that to the bike that we've compared it to, the Multistrada, in the spec that we had it, that was £23,500. So this is 7 grand cheaper. It's a lot of bike for the money when you think about it that way. And dare I say it, value for money? So I really hope this has been a helpful video to you guys watching. It's different to what we've produced with this bike before, but obviously we're a year on now in terms of our experience with this bike, and from back to back in it, you know, we've got a different context. This is an absolutely fantastic bike, and I think with a few upgrades, it can be even better. So really hope you've enjoyed that. Please subscribe to the channel, check out the KNOX range of all the gear that we use to protect ourselves on test, and we'll see you next time.